Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I thought I'd like to talk about the future a little bit. Now, the interesting thing about talking about the future is that I don't have the faintest idea of what I'm talking about. But it's kind of interesting to have a little fun and play with the idea of the future. We have, for centuries, done programs and written books and this and that about the future. And 99% of the times it's way off. And there's a reason for it, if you think about it. When we talk about the future, we filter it through our own time. And there's where we run into the problem, because we can't conceive of a world without looking at our own. In 1893 at the Chicago World's Fair, the Great White City as it was called, they asked people to make predictions of the world of 1993. It's fascinating reading. I remember reading these in the 1990s when they were published, and it was interesting to read and interestingly wrong. And of course, what was the main reason is they were filtering it through their time. We forget that fact so often when we talk about the future because we can't use our time as a palette because our time is gone. 100 years from now, we're going to be dealing with a race of people that are going to be so different from ourselves. Social norms will be so different. Matters of health will be so different. Matters of food will be so different. Maybe vegetarianism will become a big thing. Who knows? Maybe the use of animal meats will diminish, or maybe it will increase. Excuse me. It's allergy season. The other thing, maybe we'll have better control of allergies 100 years from now, and I won't sound like a basso profundo. One of the things I found rather fascinating, when I was a boy, I went to the World's Fair in New York City, in Flushing Meadows, and there I saw the future. And it was cool. And I remember that the house of the future, it cleaned itself. The kitchen prepared everything. Of course, your car would pull up and would drive you anywhere. So you could sit in the back and relax and have a cigarette. Well, it was 1964. Everybody was smoking. I went to my doctor. He was smoking a cigarette. I went here, there, and everywhere. People smoke cigarettes, even at supermarkets. Something used to drive me nuts is you'd be pushing a cart, and the wheel would get caught onto a cigarette butt on the floor. People used to just put them out on the floor all over the place. That was common practice. Now today, you don't deal with anything like that. And so, what about matters that we think of that are just dandy right now? I'm sure they're going to be looked at with horror maybe 100 years hence. Let's just say in the year 2118. Artificial intelligence, of course, is going to be a major part of it. But the problem is we can't truly conceive of what artificial intelligence is going to be like 100 years from now. Now, we're developing computers today that are developing reason. And eventually, we're going to develop machines that are going to be able to construct other machines and make improvements. And what will be the conditions or the interaction between humans and artificial intelligence? It might be very ugly. It might be very frightening. In fact, maybe humanity will take several steps backwards instead of advancing forward. There's so much to ponder and so much to think about. And I can tell you, walking in Flushing Meadows in 1964, 54 years ago, and looking at the exhibits and looking at the future and pondering how we're going to live in the bottom of the oceans, how we're going to live on the planets. That was all going to happen. And the future hasn't exactly happened yet. One of the things I thought was kind of interesting, that they didn't talk about too much, but they did hint at, because they didn't quite know how to explain it, in 1964, was the whole use of computers and how computers would change the whole world. Yes, they touched on it, but they could only touch on what they could kind of imagine. And where will computers be? And of course, computers are going to be very highly connected to artificial intelligence. What about various ways of making food, drinking? Will alcohol be banned? What about various drugs, psychedelic drugs that some people have today? Will that become something that would be putting you in jail, or will there be clubs in which people could gather around and enjoy the substance of their choice? Maybe there will be a Congress dedicated to pleasure, in deciding and decreeing what constitutes pleasure. You know, that sounds pretty crazy, but then again, almost anything will sound kind of crazy that we talk about, because we don't know. I'm making things up and looking at the world of tomorrow. But once again, we look through the prism of our own time. We cannot escape that. I have looked at countless predictions of the future, and every one of them basically uses their own time as a focal point. And let's face it, probably 100 years hence, the medical profession will have changed drastically. What about the situations with cancer and things like that? Would there be worldwide conferences on water? Will water become very valuable as a commodity? Maybe other countries will bully others over their ability to have water. What about transportation? Will we still be flying in planes back and forth like cattle? I don't think so. I think it'll be very different. I don't think it'll be as fanciful as some people seem to predict. I mean, it would be great to sit there and have a transporter and just beam yourself wherever. I think that'll happen someday in the future. I think they have to develop more understanding of particle separation and stuff like that. But 100 years from now, I'm sure there'll be different ways of transportation, and I think it'll be much better. Hopefully. Of course, I'm optimistic here, because everything that I mention 100 years hence could be much worse than it is right now. We may have regressed as a species. Maybe artificial intelligence may have made us servants. Maybe we are subservient to artificial intelligence, which constantly reinvents itself and gets more intelligent, and therefore much more in control, because our brains won't change. But artificial intelligence, its intellect will increase 100-fold constantly. Maybe wars will break out between different branches of artificial intelligence. And maybe they'll develop weapons that are far beyond our minds to destroy each other. So much that the future holds. Of course, there'll be interest in history. I look back here and I see that horn jutting out. I won't be here, but that machine, that horn, 100 years from now, that'll be in someone's collection. Someone will have that. pretty amazing when you think about it. So, just a few thoughts about the future and the fact that we don't understand it because we're not of it. And I guess the last thing I would like to mention about the future is the fact that the future will be a very, very different world, and a world in which we most probably would feel very uncomfortable in. We are of our time. It's fun to think of the future, but I don't think we'd want to be there. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe we'd love it. But I have a feeling that being human and being comfortable in our surroundings is a very important thing. And the future is uncharted territory. But I'd like to be a fly on the wall and see it a little bit. How about you? So, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.